Everybody, Pixels and Plough episode number 4. We're going to be looking at the great topic of modes today. I mean, every single music channel online's got something about modes, but I think we have some unique stuff we can contribute to the discussion. It's again your hosts, Dougie and Reece. Say hello, mate.
What's up, guys?
Is that a Zelda shirt?
It is, yeah. Apparently it glows in the dark too, but I've never worn it in the dark.
This is not the time to try it. If you unmute that video and have the video playing back as we chat again, I may eject you from the show permanently. Hey, I was to blame, I did it too. Anyway, guys, so maybe we'll start off with a quick definition of modes, and I'll give my shot at it, and then Reece, maybe you can elaborate.
Sure.
The way I see is modes are just the different orders in which one scale can be presented. So, for example, with your major scale, we'll treat it in C, for example, C, D, E, F, G, A, B. If you start that scale at every new note in the scale, you're going to get a different combination of intervals. And as you start from C going through D, E, F, G, going like, say, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, you get a different unique set of combinations of intervals there. If you go all the way back to B, you're going to get through everything that's available. So unless you're dealing with a symmetrical scale, you're going to have one mode for every number of notes there are in the scale. And each of these different starting notes is going to give you a different flavor or a different emotion or different feel than if you started on the original tonic of the key. There's going to be a list of associated chords that go with each new starting note as well. There's many different videos on modes. I think it's one of those things that people don't really get their head around for a lot of time. Maybe watching different people explain it many times over is actually what gives you the best idea. But that's the way I see it. It's the number of combinations or permutations within one scale. Yeah, Reece, you give it a shot, man.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was something that took me a while to get my head around as well when I was first starting out. But definitely starting from each of the white keys is probably the easiest way to go. But I see them as, and you kind of already touched on it, but different sort of alterations of your major or minor scales. So for instance, with Dorian, it's like your minor scale, but with a natural 6. Mm-hmm. Or Lydian is like your major scale, but with a sharp 4, etc., etc.
Yeah, I think one of the things that used to confuse me so much when I started, right? I learned all the ones as white keys, and I'm like, well, I don't really get the difference between them because they're all using the same notes, so aren't they exactly the same scale? I didn't really get the idea of how you could apply them as different flavors. And yeah, it is true, like if you're playing something in C major and then you're playing the notes of D Dorian, if you're playing on a C chord and you do those notes there, you really are just playing C major. So if you're never actually stepping out of the mode, sometimes it may not be that helpful of a way of thinking if you're a rock player.
Yeah.
If you're a jazz kind of guy and you're thinking about every time I change chords, I've got to change modes to fit that chord, you may be a bit more accurate with the target notes you're going for when you're improvising, but you still are playing part of the one scale. And a lot of people still do think there's, oh, no matter what chord they're in, if the notes belong to C major, they're just thinking of C major all the time.
Yeah.
The thing that really helped me to actually get it, I think, was when I started to think of, instead of looking at all the relative modes, so modes that have the same notes, what about looking at the ones that are the parallel modes? So starting on the same tonic note, say, for example, C, mapping out, okay, C major, that's the easy one. It's all white keys. Then you're trying to figure out, okay, well, what's the next one in order? Dorian. When you start from D to D, you look at all the interval spaces between the notes, and you learn what the intervals are that make something Dorian, and then you just apply those intervals onto C instead. And you'll find out it's the same as a minor scale, except with instead of the flat 6, it's got a major 6 in there. So you eventually start to get this idea of how do the modes differ from a major scale, that C, that one you know. And later on, it's a bit more of a better shortcut to actually look at how they differ from a minor scale if they have more in common with a minor to start with.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing you look at it the same as well, right? If you go then to Phrygian, you start with those intervals, say on a parallel mode like C, and you'll see, oh, it actually works out being like 1, flat 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7. Oh, what does that look like? It looks exactly the same as a minor scale, except the 2 is also flattened. So it kind of helps to build this mental heuristic about this mode is exactly the same as major, but with one different note or 2 different notes, or this is the same as minor with a couple of different notes. And once you go through all of the different modes of the major scale, you go to Lydian, it's the same as major with a sharp 4. Mixed Lydian, same as major with a flat 7. Yep. So I kind of put them into a bucket in my head of major and minor modes, and then probably good to think of them later on down the track as like which ones are like dominant kinds of modes, which one works with dominant chords, because that kind of could be almost its own category when you start to branch outside of just the major scale. Then you get to Aeolian, which is exactly the same as minor, natural minor, and then on B, when you go B to B, you learn those interval gaps is Locrian, and that's a bit of an interesting one because it's not going really over. It's not really a major sound or a minor sound. It's more the half diminished sound. So you're playing it over those kind of chords. Is that pretty much how do you think of them as being something's close to major or minor?
Yeah, definitely. And that's how I sort of approach them in composing as well. You know, I'll be writing something in major, I'll be writing something in minor, but for a particular moment, I might want a more specific sort of flavor. And I know that if I change just this one interval, it's going to give me that sort of flavor.
And are you thinking about that more as like a melodic choice or harmonic choice when you're doing it?
It could go either way. I usually start with chords, so I'd say it happens more often with the chords.
Yes.
Having said that, I have had quite some nice instances where I've had a chord progression ahead of time, and then when it came to writing the melody over the top, even if the chord progression as a whole didn't reflect that mode, for one particular instance, I would get that sort of flavor with the melody note. So for instance, I might have been playing in C major, and then when I got to an A minor chord, I wanted to have sort of like a Dorian flavor. So the melody note was actually an F sharp on top, as opposed to F, which is what you would normally find in C.
Yeah. And would you have had that note also in the chord, or is the melody the only place where that's being filled in?
Sometimes I would double it. Other times I would just have it in the melody, but you would hear it as an extension because you might have the 7th or the 9th underneath as well.
Yeah, yeah. I find that sometimes you can get away though when you've got very simple chords there where you're keeping it a little bit more ambiguous. So you've got a bit more room to choose which mode to go in there.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But just for the listeners, so like what you're talking about there, C major, and you were talking about you might have some melody just in C, right?
Yeah.
We switch to A minor instead of it's just to give the jazzy flavor.
Yeah.
It definitely has automatically a different sound.
Yeah, yeah.
And you could have it so that the original chord, like the first chord, doesn't have that F sharp there as well, right? That's when it really makes it just stand out for one chord. So you have, those kind of moments where you really reserve it for one special moment. That's what really works cool.
Yeah.
And so do you see that as being modal mixture? Because that's something you often hear online or you read about it in music.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely has. Yeah, it's definitely like modal mixture. And especially when you have it like side by side where you might have F in the previous chord and then F sharp in the next chord.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's a particularly good example there. Like, I mean, so you would have normally been going from going to A minor, which is a chord. It's a chord in both the keys that you're actually using, but it's just when you go into the extensions, you have that different note when you're all the way up to the 6th or the 13th in that key. That's a smart one there. It's not too jarring. It's a great example there, man. What about Do you find yourself ever using modes just vamping on the one root note instead of just, say for example, we could start in C, right, and be in C Ionian? Do you find yourself using other modes? Using quite helpful.
Oh, actually, swapping between modes with the same pedal point, you mean?
Yeah, that's right. So like one of the things you might have a groove on to just say C. That keyboard's off. You might have something just playing on C, right? The bass might be something really simple.
Yeah.
Where all the notes of the bass would fit into either mode. That's just going between C and D.
Yeah. I can think of one instance where I've done something like that. I had a bass line in A minor that went like this. Oh, actually. That same bass line over and over. But over the top, the chords switched from A Aeolian to, I guess, A Dorian. Yeah, so the first two chords, A minor and G, they're both in Aeolian. But then that F sharp diminished. That's where you're getting more of the Dorian flavor. And then right after that, you get an F major, which takes you back into the Aeolian flavor.
You and I had done that.
Yeah.
That's the chorus for it's A, and then to G, oh, it's slightly different than G, and then instead of the F sharp diminished, it goes to D on F sharp.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then to F.
That's your Stairway to Heaven.
Is it? How original am I?
Oh, they do a weird thing where it's not completely
I don't
weird.
think you're allowed to do this, man. I don't think you're allowed to do it.
Yeah, let's do it. Abort. Let's just say it was similar, and then that's it.
You have to reconsider your worth as a musician.
Yeah, Stairway denied.
Oh, that felt good. What about, so when it comes to thinking like modally, like say if you're playing chords that all belong to like the parent scale, we use C again. C is an easy example for people, right? You're staying like playing C, G, A minor, F, right? You know, the chord progression of death.
Yeah.
When you're doing that, right? Are you thinking about going from C Ionian to G mixed Lydian to A Aeolian to F Lydian when you do that, or are you just thinking C major?
Just thinking C major.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think that the jazz approach is to actually think about what chords you're going into there to make sure you get you're landing on the right notes. But there's sometimes where I think it's impractical when I think they just become such ingrained sounds that people know that. I think you just got to avoid the wrong intervals over each chord, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure there's the intervals you can put in every one of those chords. If you put like all the worst possible ones there, even though I do like the fourth over major chord sometimes. Like, no one's thinking mixed Lydian on that G in that chord progression. No way.
No.
And no one's thinking, when that F is just the fuck note, isn't it? Oh, that's gnarly. So yeah, pretty much. No one's thinking that. No one's thinking that. No one's thinking that. Do we just jazz the four chords of death?
Yeah. I think is that the same tier as Stairway?
Yeah. Subhuman tier of harmony.
But I know what you're getting at. Like, yeah, they're all part of the same parent scale. So if you're using that sort of approach, I feel like it's kind of redundant. But you can take it a bit further where all of a sudden when it gets to the G chord, you don't use Mixolydian, or when you get to the A minor, you don't use Aeolian, you know? That's when you can get a bit more flavor.
It's almost like, I feel like a lot of the times people are just using like the pentatonic like equivalent of notes you would use over it. Like,
yeah
over that one's whatever the other one. It's like, I think that a lot of modern harmony has actually been pretty much reduced to those pentatonic choices. Like the extensions just aren't there.
Yeah.
I think people naturally hear that. Those are the notes they're going to really do over chord changes because it's just become so ubiquitous in modern music. What a lot of things I've noticed as well, some people who are playing, like they'll think of what key they're in terms of minor, right? Like we even look at your example before, right? You're going A minor, and then G, and then the F sharp chord you did, right?
Yeah.
And then actually that is exactly what I did in Hope. F sharp. Yeah, but when you go into that chord there, right, the F sharp one, are you thinking about playing like a mode of F sharp over that one there, or are you thinking that how has that changed from the original A minor sound? So you're thinking that as being like I'm playing A Dorian there?
Yeah, A Dorian as opposed to what would it be for F sharp?
Is it F sharp Locrian? I think it is.
Yeah, you'd be right.
I was thinking of that, right?
Yeah, no. I think about how it's affecting the home key, I guess.
I think that's sometimes the easiest way of doing it. I think if it comes to needing to improvise on the fly, then maybe when you've got that chord there, the F sharp one, you might want to be thinking of it as a mode sometimes.
Yeah.
When it comes to harmonically, it kind of makes sense when you think of it like whatever the home key is, and then just whatever the slight alteration is there. But when it comes to that, like thinking of, I think if you're set up in the right position, that you got the key notes that are going to be there, like your thirds and your sevenths, they're really accessible rather than thinking, oh, I'm all in A. It depends how well you conceptualize your different guitar shapes you're doing. If you're used to being like this one position for Dorian, if you're thinking about each note being like root, 7th, 6th, 5th, like the kind of thing in your head, then maybe you can just stay in one concept as you're improvising. But I find if you're thinking about changing mode, sometimes it can be quite helpful to unlock more of the neck.
Yeah.
So when do you feel like using the different modes or the modal mixture is most effective? Are there any times you feel like you're using it more often than others, or is it just completely unpredictable?
I feel like the most that I've used the modal mixture is when it comes to writing stuff in major. For whatever reason, I can't stick to just plain old major. I always want to get in the flat 7s and the flat 6s and stuff, you know? So that superhero sort of vibe.
Okay, you're talking about with the superhero, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about it.
That's it.
The old borrowed flat 6, flat 7 from minor, right?
Yeah. When you get to the flagpole at the end of a Super Mario level.
Yeah, I love it. I've been guilty of using that, and probably of using it a bit often on some new stuff I've been working on. It's too satisfying.
Yeah.
What about we were talking about the example before where you've got like a very like a stable sort of a bass line.
Yeah.
You were giving an example of the A. Well, that was that one, right? You had a simple kind of A bass line, right?
Yeah.
And you had chords over it. What was happening in the bass line when you got to the F sharp chord?
So yeah, it's the same notes repeating over and over. So In the whole phrase, we've got an A, a G, an E, and a D. So it's kind of interesting, actually.
You got nothing near the F there to really give away what key.
Well, that's right. The bass line itself. It's got C as well, but that whole bass line is very pentatonic.
Yeah, this is actually my point why I was going to ask you about that. I found that the pentatonics are a real savior for giving you a really open palette of what to use, because obviously the modes of the major scale, if we look at the major examples we had before, right? If you've got Ionian, you've got Lydian, and you've got mixed Lydian, those are the ones I would categorize into major sounds, right? Your major pentatonic scale is 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6, and the notes you're leaving out are actually the notes that make those modes different to each other.
That's right.
Ionian's got the 4, Lydian's got the sharp 4, and the flat 7 versus natural 7 between mixed Lydian and the other two.
Yeah.
You're leaving both that 4th and 7th degree out where the semitones exist in the key. So that's really allows you to open up really doing anything if you stick those pentatonics. So guys out there wanting a bit of a songwriting tip, if you want to have something that plays around with color quite a bit, write a groove where it's rhythmically interesting, but your harmony can change up as long as you're keeping it ambiguous within the bass lines. And sometimes you can get some really good vamps and repetitive grooves that's become quite interesting because of that.
I think that's why a song like, especially the first time you hear it, Billie Jean, can sound quite magical because the bass line is all just pentatonic. Yeah, that's just the notes from F pentatonic, or at least in the key I was playing it in. But then when you hear the chords come in, you might think, oh, it's just a regular F minor song. But then the chords end up being. And so in that second chord, you've actually got the raised 6 in there. It's like, oh, it's actually in a Dorian sort of feel.
Yeah. And you do hear a lot of that in that. I guess the funky guys have really got some of those memorable bass lines down that aren't too busy and aren't too harmonically adventurous, but what they just laid down the best groove for very interesting stuff to happen on top.
Yeah, that's right.
That's a good example there. And your one before was more of an A minor pentatonic bass line, right?
Yeah.
Same thing applies with what I was saying before, and I was using the analogy of Lydian and mixed Lydian and Ionian. If you want to go for the minor perspective, you've got the Aeolian, which is the normal minor scale we all know, and you've got Phrygian and you've got Dorian, which are only just slightly different. So Phrygian's got that flat 2 compared to minor, and Dorian's got the raised 6, which you've spoken about a couple of times now. And if you look at the minor pentatonic scale, it's 1 flat 3, 4, 5, flat 7. So that actually, you can play either of those 3 modes over that as well.
Yeah, that's right.
So that kind of, I guess, approach can be even expanded on even more. If you reduce your bass line to have even less than those 5 notes, make it even more ambiguous, then you can start to borrow some modes that are completely outside the major scale.
Yeah, something I reckon would work if you have a bass line in a minor pentatonic scale, but you leave out the 3rd. Well, that means you could go to Aeolian, you could go to Dorian, all of that, but you could also go to Mixolydian all of a sudden.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, you got anything you can simulate from that?
No examples come to mind with that. What about you?
On the fly. So, have you had a very basic bass line then, right? Like, there's a lot of bass lines that have only got the 7th and the flat 7 and the root.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. Just the normal minor 7. It's actually a bit strange. I think that even though it's kind of an Aeolian voicing, it sounds a bit more half diminished. Let me try another one. So. Uh, that's good. That's the normal second out. So it can't be Phrygian. There's your mixed Lydian sound. There's your Dorian.
Yeah.
There's your fucked mode. So, one of the things I've kind of been thinking about lately as well, you think about a mode that's kind of different to each other, one note away. That's like an easy way of thinking of it, like Dorian being one note away from Aeolian, or Phrygian being one note away.
Yeah.
Can also think about other modes that are one note away. And this one kind of came to me that, and it's always kind of, when I was originally trying to get better with my ear training, I'd often get confused between the sound of Dorian and mixed Lydian, because they're both kind of this slightly jazzier or funkier alternative to what you're used to hearing. And the only difference between those scales actually is whether you're using a minor or a major third.
That's right, yeah.
So they're kind of like the minor and major version of each other, one note away. So you could quite easily, I just did an example of that before, where that's chord there is like that's A, C sharp, E, F sharp, G. And if you could easily just change to the C instead of C sharp.
Yeah.
So they're quite good modes to actually switch between.
Yeah.
Polychord.
Right.
I think that's a cool way of looking at things, and even you could even have stuff like melodic minor in there if you were keeping things I guess ambiguous enough. It's very hard to get a cool sounding bass line on a keyboard that's only 25 keys. That low girth in there.
You're doing well.
I think like one of the things that would be a good recommendation for a lot of people to try and get their head around modes more and to put it into use. Write down all of the different combinations you can get from the major scale at least. Write the names of the modes down. So from Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, Lydian, mixed Lydian, Aeolian, and Locrian, and figure out how to play them in C. That's pretty much what we've been talking about today a bit.
Yeah.
You know major to start with. It's just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Treat that as your base. That's what you're calculating everything from, and figure out those patterns using just like how things relate to the Ionian scale. And you'll have like this little set of formulas like 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You'll see which ones are close to each other and kind of try and group them in your head so that you can actually switch between them easily. I think that's be very important. And then look at when you've actually got one of those modes there, what kind of chords can you build from the first degree of each of those? Any chords you can see like that you can build, including the one of that mode you've written there, that's going to be something that's signature to that mode. And that's how you get some of those really signature voicings coming out.
Yeah, actually, that's one thing that's interesting. Actually, having chords that aren't necessarily triadic in the traditional sense to evoke the modal flavors. So, like one that I've been playing around with at the moment is just getting a Phrygian flavor without actually playing the third, and instead doing 1, flat 2, 4, and 5. That's quite a nice sound.
Gerudo Valley.
Yeah.
This episode sponsored by Zelda. And guess who else? Yeah. I'll just get him in there every week. Yeah, well, what you did there was a really good example, and that to me sounded distinctly Phrygian. I mean, those intervals probably occur in another mode somewhere else, maybe a bit more of an exotic one. But in terms of that one flat 2, 4, 5, the flat 2, the only other mode of the major scale has a flat 2 is Locrian, but it also has a flat 5. So
Yeah.
so that's a very distinctly Phrygian sound there if you call upon that voicing.
Yeah.
I think that you can find some very interesting combinations like that. Like if you were trying to think of something very uniquely Ionian, what would you do? What's something you could say that's just definitively Ionian of voicing?
You'd have the perfect fourth in there.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Probably the major second as well. That could probably get you a very Ionian sound.
Yeah. I reckon that you need to have the seventh in there as well, just so that no one can confuse with mixed Lydian, right? That's the one that gives away it's totally unambiguous then.
Yeah.
But that chord you wouldn't necessarily be able to just launch into that very often because it is clashing the fourth in there. But I do like the sound if it's. Definitely can work. So you can really emphasize, I guess, the voicings. I usually find it if you're looking for whereabouts the semitones are in the chords, that can really give it away. So, so you know, in Ionian, there's a semitone between the third and fourth, and also between the seventh and octave. So if you had something on a C bass, you have that B, E, and F in there, and the B in there as well. Like even that interval there, C, E, F, B over C. There's not really many other chords there's not really many other modes that could belong to. And same applies to any of the other ones. If you go to like
if you took that exact voicing you had and changed the F to an F sharp, that'd be a very Lydian sound.
F to that's right. That one there, you probably could emphasize it more by having the G in there as well, so you could hear the rub between the semitones there. So there's something I was kind of playing around with, and I think this is like rather than giving something the voicing sound of one of those modes, if you look at the major scale itself, right, they've got these two semitones are always going to appear in there, depending which it's just going to depend which interval it's between, right?
Yeah.
So if you just find those particular so B, C, E, and F are in C major, right?
Yeah.
If you just change the bass line for but keep those notes just in that voicing, you can come up with some, I guess, jazzy voicings that sound particularly part of the major scale. So if you keep those exact same top notes there, it kind of, no matter what bass note you change, it's going to change the flavor of that mode. So I think it's just the fact that you get those semitones occurring in that order that gives it that major scale sound. So even that there, it sounds quite clashy when you hear it by itself, but then when you get the context of the bass note, it really gives you a different flavor there.
It makes sense at that point.
Yeah, it's some Rick Wakeman song. Maybe he got onto that about 40 years before me then.
Was that all 25 keys just then?
What? You can smell the cape. That same thing applies as well if you're finding the half steps in other scales like melodic minor as well. The half steps are a little bit close together, so you get it between the second and the flat third, and between the and also between the 7th and octave. So that there, as opposed to, that's more of a major scale sound.
Yeah.
That's definitely melodic minor, you can hear it.
Definitely.
So if you wanted something to really, really tell you where you are, just play a chord with all the half steps in it. It's like the opposite of what the pentatonic scales do. They intentionally leave out all of the half steps so that it's ambiguous. That's the totally not ambiguous voicing.
Yeah.
You just need something in the bass to give away which mode you're a part of. You just know at least when you hear that festy concoction, you're part of the very consonant group we call the major scale. Even though you might not think so when you first hear it. Practice your pentatonics, guys. Know when you want to be ambiguous and when you don't want to be ambiguous. And practice switching around modes that are very similar to each other. And that's probably the easiest way to do it. If you look at one of the things I posted on my Plough Studios page ages ago was about looking about how far away the modes are, like when you look at it on the circle of fifths. And what you're really getting, like say, for example, you're starting with that C major, which we were talking about before. If you look for one of the modes that introduces a sharp into the mode, there's only one mode that's more sharp than major, and it's a Lydian mode, right? Because you're sharpening the 4th in there.
Yeah.
If you go C Lydian is C, D, E, F sharp, G, A, B. Which key of the major scale has only one sharp? It's G, right?
Yeah.
So when you're actually playing C, you got a groove. When you change from Ionian to Lydian, you're actually doing one sharp-wise key change.
Yeah, that's right.
And so I guess the ones we've talked about there, when we had one note difference, is we're really going either one note sharp on the circle of fifths, and then just starting on that root note, or we're going one flat.
Yeah.
So those ones that are one away are going to be the easiest to do because it's only just one note change, right? But it's quite common to borrow from the parallel minor scale, right? That's what you were talking about before, the superhero kind of thing.
Yeah.
And if you look at like C major, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, to 1, 2, flat 3, 4, 5, flat 6, flat 7. There's 3 different notes there than what you've done with the major one.
Yeah.
You've effectively gone three keys in a flat-wise direction.
Yeah, that's right.
So you can actually do a pretty big changes and make it work.
D-I-B.
D-I-B. Yeah, that's a bit of an in-joke for the 3 people that are watching us right now.
Yeah.
Well, I reckon that gives at least a pretty good idea for modes. If anyone has any questions or they want us to do any follow-up videos, like we could go a lot more detail with other scales in this, but I think the general concept is there, and we just recommend that people try and write stuff with this rather than just spending a billion hours on YouTube arguing like lispy nerds about what modes are used for and which mode something belongs to. Just start making some music, guys. That's what it's all about.
Well, yeah, that's the way that you learn the most, I reckon, just by experimenting, trial and error, seeing what you like and all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you and I, like, as much as we are like pretty educated about music theory and very into it and nerding out, like we've done a lot of experimentation to really confirm what it is we're doing. And it's not like we're always doing things based on the theory first. I know we do a lot of stuff where we just play it by ear, do something completely random sometimes, and then it happens to work. And then just the way our brains are, we like to understand it afterwards.
Yeah.
I'm never really just going, oh, I've got to do this. I've got to go from this interval, that's the only thing that's going to work here, and my brain's going to combust if I don't do that. Like, none of us are thinking like that.
No, that's right. It's half informed, but then half intuitive and half something else.
its constituent parts add up to more than 100%.
Yes. I do have one last question for you, actually, if I may. Going back to writing with modes, if you ever write in a mode, explicitly in one mode, do you have the key signature in relation to the parallel Ionian, or do you write it in the key of the parent scale?
Ooh, I've actually thought about that before. I mean, like a lot of times when I'm doing notation, I guess I'm writing for people in a band that don't really give a shit about that kind of stuff. They're mainly reading from tabs more than from notation.
Yeah,
I've thought about this as well, because even like when I was analyzing pieces in school, and I didn't go to uni like you, so I'm not 100% sure that, but I've seen some people do notation, right? So say if it's Dorian, like a piece which is all Dorian, sometimes they'll write it in the natural minor equivalent, and then they'll just be putting in the accidental all the time for the changed note. I've seen also, yeah, just whatever the parent scale is, and it's just you can imply what mode it's in based on wherever you're landing back on that tonic all the time.
Yeah,
I think it's the tonicizing, whatever the word is, of that pitch that really makes it sound like that. But like it's the same really. Like a lot of people understand the concept of going between major and relative minors a lot, right? It's the exact same thing as that. It's like it's really just when you know major and relative minor, you know 2 of the possible 7 modes. This is just the 5 versions of that. So to me, it makes no sense that you would doing anything other than really putting the parent scale, and you can tell what it is from there. But I do get that perspective of, like, say you're playing in it's a mixed Lydian song and you write it in the major equivalent and you just put a flat 7 in all the time. I guess it, depending on how you conceptualize music, that might be more helpful and might be easier to read. I guess you want the readers to be able to understand it quickly. So
yeah.
What's your feeling with it, man?
Well, I going off of what you said, that last thing there, I get why at uni their preference was to anything that was modal, write it in the parent scale. So if you're in, let's just make it easy, if you're writing in D Dorian, you write it in the key signature of C major as opposed to D minor. And it does make it easier for people to read, arguably, because they're not having to work out accidentals on the fly. Although if it's the same accidental occurring every time, I guess you'd get used to it. But personally, my preference is to go by the parallel key. Or, yeah. So if I were writing in D Dorian, I'd have 1 flat in the key signature and just have a natural every time there was a B.
I guess that it does point out quickly that it is in that mode then, right?
Yeah.
It's very clear. I think that might break down a little bit more when you're doing very outside kind of, like that's still only working when you're really in modes of the major scale, right?
Yeah.
The whole circle of fifths, circle of fourths system is based on being in the major scale anyway. So standard notation is really catered to that more than anything else.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, I guess either or. I don't really have to do it with too many people. Normally, I just have to explain to whoever I've written what the hell I was thinking about putting that weird chord in there. Just think of it like this, and it's usually I'm saying, like, if it's I'm explaining it in the way that you would prefer to read it. Like if it's song in D minor, and then there's the actual B natural in there. Like I'm just saying, just think of whenever you normally have to B flat, change to B. It's like D minor, but that note's changed. Like that's pretty much how I try and explain it.
Yeah, and I've always thought too, just a case for it. You know, when people write in harmonic minor or melodic minor, you know, say if we're in, we'll make it easy again, we'll go with A minor. You know, if you're writing in A minor, you'd have the key signature for C, so you'd have no sharps or flats. And then if you're in harmonic minor, you'd add the sharp next to the G, just whenever it occurs.
Yeah.
By extension, for melodic, you'd put the sharp next to the F for F sharp. So that's kind of how I think of it too. So going back to the modes, I just write the accidental for what has changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess with those scales, like the harmonic minor itself doesn't necessarily fit. Even if you wanted to keep that as being the key you're in all the time, you don't really have a standard key signature you can put there that would cater for that. So
well, that's right, and that's what makes them different from mode. Yeah.
And I guess the secondary dominance, when you see melodic changes based on that as well, they're always putting them with accidentals.
Yeah.
I guess if the whole piece is always going to have the B natural there and not the B flat, then arguments like, wow, what's the B flat seems superfluous or unrelated.
Yeah.
So I get it. Just depends, probably, like, it's based on how you've grown up thinking of the modes and how you conceptualize them. That's how it makes sense to do it.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And the horrible usage of melodic minor in classical kind of music can be reserved for another episode. Never really understood the fact that there are all these modes to it, and you can treat it just like another scale, until I completely ignored the whole thing about ascending in a particular way and descending back down normal minor. That just seems ridiculous to me.
I prefer the jazz approach.
Yeah, I prefer it as well. Otherwise, you only ever hear it going up. You change the chords on the way up, and then you have to go back to mixing up on the way back down. I know, it's a bit weird to me, man.
Yeah.
I reckon we'll wrap it up there, though. Guys, if there's anything you want to hear us talk about, let us know. And if you want to like and subscribe, that'd be great, because it'd be good to have some people joining us for these chats. And I think Reece and I, we just enjoy talking about it with each other. So I think we'll be here doing it weekly for as long as we can fit into our schedules.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. And it wouldn't be a Pixels and Plough episode if we didn't stare at the camera awkwardly and play the most horrific chord voicing in tandem. Closes off. So here we go.